Back in 2019 BC, that's before COVID, I was invited by the Australian Learning Lecture to consider the nature of the future school. I'd like to record my thanks to the Foundation for this opportunity, and I'd also like to express my admiration for the extraordinary contribution of Ellen Koshland in advancing Australian education. In doing this work, I found remarkable schools around the world well advanced in the work of creating institutions fit for the future. COVID interrupted that work and the work of every human on Earth. And the impact of COVID on schools will remain ambiguous, I think, for some years to come. Now, some people are understandably desperate to get their old lives back, to snap back to things as they were. Others see this as an extraordinary opportunity to step back and to ask ourselves some long overdue fundamental questions. I believe that it's vital that we seize this opportunity, that we don't just wait to slide back into the old patterns and habits and structures. Rather, we should be thinking about the longer-term plans we can lay now to transform our schooling systems to be future fit. And the good news? We now have an immense number of examples to help us, a kind of global prototyping lab from which to learn. Seeing is believing. But if you were to be asked to pick out which schools should provide our guides, how would you go about it? Well, my thinking process went like this. There are evolving new models of schools around the world, but suggesting which provide models for the future can't just be a matter of personal opinion. A good way in is to look first at the organisations that focus on the future itself. How is it shaping up, and what does this mean for schools? My research showed that you can distill out of the work of such organisations sets of design principles for creating schools fit for the future. So the second step was identifying those principles. My research then looked at schools across the world that were using those principles in their work, with some remarkably encouraging outcomes. We look at future-focused schools in diverse settings, from California to Delhi, from New Zealand to Spain. There's a database of around 50, there could have been many more. And we explore the thinking that has led to their establishment, the practical new models that have resulted. And we consider what they might have to teach us about what a new normal could look like. One that is focused on creating the future the next generation needs. And out of that, some very interesting other patterns emerged. In this brief talk, I'm going to share these research findings with you and then make some suggestions about how to go forward. If this captures your interest, and I very much hope that it will, a short paper is available to you after this lecture, and a book will be forthcoming, we hope, early in the new year. Now, before getting stuck in, let me say, though, that one of the outcomes of the COVID catastrophe has been a resurgence of the view that the school as an institution has had its day, that the long-delayed promise of EdTech is about to be fulfilled. Soon, we won't need schools anymore, and EdTech will do to the institution of school what Amazon has done to shopping. Maybe the growth of pandemic pods will fuel this idea. Well, I passionately reject this suggestion, whilst I recognise that it is a possibility. As I'll argue later, the social institution of school is a vital component in thriving communities and in fostering the well-being of young people, if the institution is redesigned. And that redesign is even more imperative if we want our institutions to drive towards equity, as opposed to entrenching existing inequalities. So the beginning of my research journey was to review the global organisations that intentionally employ forms of futures thinking as a tool to support policy. In case you believe that futures thinking is an irrelevant academic activity, let's get clear. The future just kicked the door down. We can't assume steady state continuity with the past. There are discernible trends and also disruptions that profoundly impact the nature of life on Earth, and schools need to shape up to that reality. So here is the set of 23 organisations we looked at who intentionally factor in thinking about the nature of the future into their work on learning. No doubt there are more out there. Now, you can see They are diverse, ranging from intergovernmental research agencies to challenge prize sponsors to think tanks. And out of this review, it was possible then to distill sets of design principles of future-focused schools that were held in common, though they were sometimes expressed differently. These design principles form the heart of my findings, and they are the key practical takeaway for educators and leaders. They fall into three clusters. First, I found design principles that focus on values that future schools should manifest, on the operational philosophy that demonstrate those values in practice, and on the learner's experience of all of that. First then, values. Our surveyed organisations all privileged some key values for future schools in their work. Perhaps this reflects the fact that something important has been lost, a North Star. This is not to deny that many school leaders do already focus, or try to focus, on this issue, in some contexts finding it very difficult to do so in their prevailing accountability regimes. In looking at the initiatives in our dataset, we found the following design principles relating to the concept of values. First, purpose-driven. Future schools are themselves focused on the purpose of both individual and collective thriving, and on helping their learners to acquire personal purpose, building their why. Equity-focused. Such schools should work to address inequities and social justice and help young people to do so. Third, promoting identity. And this principle suggests that each learner's social and cultural identity must be nurtured, cultivating a sense of belonging and of value. Next, strength-based. This principle asserts that the school recognises and celebrates and builds from each and every individual's existing assets. Finally, relevant. And this proposes that learning be relevant to the local and the global community. Work that matters should be an important feature. The second set of principles focuses on operational philosophy. Values mean nothing if their force is not felt in translation to practice. So the organisations we looked at had assembled clear principles in this domain. They were, first, learning-focused. Learning is at the heart. So understanding how learning happens, the very best in research on learning sciences, underpin developments. And this applies to adult learning of all staff as well. Now, this is a critically important principle, and it is not axiomatic by any means in all schools today. Next, flexible and dynamic. The school should flexibly iterate different modes of teaching and learning to meet the evolving needs of learners and the wider world, to be agile, if you like. In an age of disruption, this is an imperative, as schools found out in 2020. Next, technology enhanced. Future schools use technology extensively and responsibly to liberate learning, amplify effective and diverse modalities, and to enable both personalisation and collaboration. And finally, ecosystemic. This principle asserts the school should be seriously porous with many active partners in organising learning. It will be deeply connected to its local community and also to the global community through technology to provide richer learning experiences and diverse pathways for learners. And then the third cluster. That focuses on learners' experience of all the previous principles. And that, of course, is crucial, because what's it like to be on the receiving end? We found a strong awareness of this issue in many of the organisations we surveyed, and it's reflected in the following principles. First, personalised. The learner's experience relates to her personal needs, passions, and development. These are at the centre, not the institution, the teacher, or external bodies of knowledge. Next, integrated. The learner experiences meaning through learning that transcends silos, building relevant connections both within and between disciplines. Inclusive. The culture is experienced as respectful and welcoming. Relational. Individuals are known. Good relationships are the basis for deep learning. Collaboration is the norm. And finally, empowering. Future schools build and leverage learner agency, providing opportunities for learners to take increasing responsibility and ownership over their learning. Now, I would be very surprised if any of these were completely unfamiliar to you. But ask yourself how often you see them fully realized and combined. Taken together, they give the coordinates of the new model. They aren't a recipe, they are the ingredients. And it's inspiring to see how schools across the world are combining and emphasizing them differently. When we compiled a database of schools that were utilizing these principles, and the book describes many of them in some depth, we also noticed another pattern emerging. Many of the schools utilizing these principles were also addressing some of the key challenges and opportunities of our time. The mission, of course, was for the benefit of their own young people, but they also had the big global issues in mind. And we found 6 areas where schools had explicitly and intentionally determined to make a difference to the future, and they were employing the design principles to help them do it. The first is that of schools aiming to grow ethical leadership. Such schools give primacy to the notion that the future demands new kinds of leadership, ethical, democratized. Here is Jeff Holt, who runs the Liger Leadership Academy in Phnom Penh, a school shaped to create the leaders the future needs. This is a country ravaged by a traumatic past.
We take very seriously our goals. We call them leadership competencies, and it's things like vision and influence, about networking, about problem solving, about communication and collaboration, and dot connecting, being able to connect dots and solve problems, being able to understand how one thing impacts another thing. And that is really the basis for our whole curriculum. So it's not just an add-on, as many people talk about, but those kinds of competencies, these leadership competencies, are skills that will bring them into the future. And in particular, our students in Cambodia, in the next 20 or 30 years, we believe these literally are the skills that they need to create a better economy and a better country. But in addition to that, we also think about their future skills, not only of just competencies like being able to network, being able to communicate effectively and so on, but also who people are. The ethics and the values that people hold are very important to us, and it's very important in Cambodia to rebuild people that are leaders that have strong value systems and that really understand, that are globally minded, understand the world, and care about other people. So we do things that are real world projects. We have a group of students that are working on marine biology in the coast off of Cambodia. They have become the first certified scuba divers in the country, and they are working with people, with researchers from all over the world to try to save the habitat off the coast. So this is a 3-year project, so it's very authentic and very real, and it really makes a huge impact. They've presented at international conferences. And I give you one example, but I could give you 100 examples of things like that our students are doing. And my point is that when you do things like that, when you are doing things that are authentic, that are real, and that are impactful, that actually make a difference, it is motivating for students. So for the first time really in my whole career, I've seen students be completely engaged in their learning. Every day, they want to make a difference. They want to work on these larger initiatives that can create change. I guess the second part of it is really the idea of the world as a classroom. There are 7 billion people in the world, more than 7 billion people. And we think at Liger that pretty much everyone works together with our students at Liger to learn and work on projects together. So every single day, our students are working with people from all over the world, working with mentors to work on projects. We have a very critical and amazing staff that works with them, but oftentimes we don't really know anything about the project. For example, I'm working on this satellite project with these students. I don't know anything about satellites, but I'll tell you, I know a lot more now, but our students are literally satellite experts because the whole world has opened up. And so really the idea of a teacher at school, we really question the whole notion of who's working, who's helping students learn. But the real answer that we've been working on for years is everyone.
As you heard from Jeff, design principles of purpose, ecosystemic, and empowering are especially important. And this is a fast expanding field. The United World Colleges, Future Nations Schools Africa, Mary L. Booker Leadership Academy, Nova Pioneer Schools, and many others. There seems to be a felt need to address the leadership deficit in this world of ours. Leadership based not on class or wealth or entitlement, but on competence and values. The way in which COVID-19 played out globally threw into sharp relief how critical, wise, competent leadership was. Now, the second archetype is of schools building our technological future. In the Kozen schools in Japan, for example, and schools such as Chungnam Samsung Academy, Korea, or Warana Park here in Australia, we found schools that take as their guiding mission the idea that we need to create young people who are not just consumers, victims, or objects of technology, but rather who combine technological confidence and competence with a value frame that serves humanity. The evolution of this type of school may be a fundamental part of our overall quest to thrive. Naturally, design principles of technology enhanced and learning focus, amongst others, are preeminent. Third, we see schools devoted to our environmental thriving. The Green School in Indonesia, and now also in New Zealand and Mexico, is representative of schools giving primacy to the idea that we have no future unless every child becomes environmentally literate, passionate, and active. At the Green School, the curriculum design is derived from its key principles of relevance, purpose, relational, and of course, ecosystemic. This is a fast expanding category worldwide too. Worldwide examples include the Academy for Global Citizenship in the US, the Muse Schools, California, Forest Schools, and many others. Fourth, we see schools committed to enabling their learners to navigate the fast-changing world of work and employment. This archetype comprises schools that are particularly focused on the idea that the future labour market will be disrupted and volatile, and that to ensure their future prosperity, learners need to become career navigators. There are numerous examples: Latitude School, California, schools in the pioneering Big Picture family across the world, like Launceston here in Tasmania. These make internships a central part of their offer to introduce their learners to multiple models of a working life. We're seeing schools that grow entrepreneurs and change makers. LearnLife Barcelona is representative of the numerous schools now addressing the challenge of growing the world's capacity to create and manage change and innovation. This rapidly growing field is becoming increasingly studied. It includes schools like the Riverside School in Gujarat and Nuvu Studios in the US. These schools are drawing upon design principles for learning that develop the entrepreneurial competencies and the value frame that drives motivation to make change for the common good. The practical impact of those design principles is directly felt. In the case of LearnLife, for example, a very different way of using time and of structuring the working week. Finally, the schools that give particular emphasis to nurturing a sense of identity in their learners. Ngā Tapu Wai in Auckland, New Zealand, is archetypal of schools whose foremost mission is to help young people develop and discover their human identity. And all through school, educating from kindergarten to year 13, the school's ethos is that students need a strong and embedded understanding of themselves as Maori, as a proud and productive people pre- and post-colonisation. And this school believes that in order to create successful futures, young people need to discover who they are, together with a sense of belonging. Here is Arahia Sterling, the much honoured principal of the school.
We really need to ensure that our children come from a space where they feel safe about their self-identity, which will improve their self-efficacy because they understand who they are, why they are, where they've come from. That's totally different to just teaching a person something. In terms of us as Māori, we come from quite a broken space, and our children need to understand that you don't need to remain feeling deprived from being Māori. You can actually still be Māori in a much, much better world that recognise their Māoriness. When our students know how important their Māoriness is, then everything's important. So when they know how important their language is, then everything's important. I believe that the future for our students in terms of their identity is far more important, because the world's asking a different type of human being now. And the world is asking for someone that knows how to connect, truly connect with an energy that another person requires you to connect to. And that's what we require in our culture, that you're truly present, that what you're saying is honest, that what you are saying is dignified and it doesn't belittle people, that you check yourself and you be the best part of yourself, because that's what you expect you to be as a Māori person. So when you look at the world and the way in which we need to engage now, it's about relationships. Entrepreneurialism means that the more that you can make someone understand your space and understand that you would be safe in their space and vice versa, is a much more important commodity than handing over a piece of paper with a whole lot of things on it saying that you can be that person. And the new dimensions of education systems is identity, and how valuable it is that every child in the world has one, and how do we capture that to enrich their learning experience and return joy to them.
Let me say clearly, no school is about just one thing. But in this research, I found that first, there are usable, clear design principles available for the future schools, and they are being modelled across the world for educators to explore and adopt or adapt. And second, there is emerging a movement in which schools are engaging themselves deeply in the biggest challenges of our time. They are addressing them head on. They believe schools should no longer exist in a separate bubble. My final observations come back to the issue of leadership. Many, though by no means all, many of the examples of schools we have found that are intentionally working to be future fit are operating outside of the publicly funded systems. Across the world, numerous startups are appearing. A few are state-sponsored, such as in Beijing and Qatar. School chains, utilising configurations of the design principles described earlier, are multiplying, from United World Colleges, micro schools such as Agile Learning Centres, Quantum Camp, Acton Academy, Round Square, Whittle Schools and Studios, many more. Now, too few such schools are available to the disadvantaged, since so many are fee-paying or independent. And a serious concern is that the most advantaged will access future-facing schools, whilst many schools in the public sector remain constrained by the old paradigm. It is partly, I think, because the public will has not yet been built to effect a shift, and partly because teachers are not trusted sufficiently to reorient in these directions. Too many schools are stuck in the slow lane. So what can leaders do to bring their systems up to speed? Of course, this isn't just a question for leaders. There's a need for learners and parents too to get proactive. But in addressing this professional audience, I offer 3 ideas which I see as a priority. The first is to build the public will for change. A major blockage to change is politicians' assumptions about what the public wants or will tolerate. But they have a role in creating a different culture of expectation. And the pandemic may help in that, since so much is being re-evaluated. We need new narratives of what education is for and what it can be. The diverse experiences of parents, educators, and young people of the disruption of learning during the pandemic can be a springboard for the development of such narratives. Second, encourage a different professional debate. How might we encourage informed, systematic debate about the school design principles, what they mean, what they're based on, where's the research on how they're best implemented, and what are the practical implications. The set of principles laid out here have been synthesized from the work of some of the key future-focused organizations in an iterative process with innovative practitioners. That doesn't make them comprehensive. No doubt others will arise. So whether as a leader of a system or as a leader within a school, creating learning communities committed to exploring future-focused design could become a priority. And then creating the conditions where the selected principles can be systematically enacted in practice authentically. This is what creates the school fit for the future. What's important is to show how this is doable and with powerful effect. Third, become leaders who really lead. System leaders, the public servants sometimes pejoratively termed bureaucrats, they have a particularly crucial role in offering real leadership. They need to enrich the ideas pool and the evidence upon which politicians can rely. And they need an unbureaucratic mindset, more outward-looking, more curious, and open to new developments. Informed by design principles, they need to be more willing to consider different uses of time and space, people and technology. In closing, let me say this. A school of the future should not be imagined as, on the one hand, adjuncts of the powerful new technologies, nor even as new community centres. I believe we need to see them as a fundamental element in the range of new solutions humankind must evolve if we are to overcome and transcend the existential challenges that confront us. Schools have by no means outlived their usefulness. On the contrary, they are vital institutions, but only if they're redesigned. An environmental revolution that saves our habitat and our existence upon it. A transformed approach to other species, genuinely democratic, equitable societies, personal well-being. None of this is achievable unless we develop institutions that are explicitly aimed at bigger objectives than heretofore. It's about the development of new humans. In short, it's about how we are to thrive. And I believe that transformed schools are key to achieving this vision for our futures. And I know now there are schools who are intent on doing it. With the right leadership, it can become every school's journey.